InFi, episode 27.
Welcome to InFi, the future of finance, hosted by American economist and author Dr. Robert Murphy. Each week, tune in for dynamic discussions with business pioneers about emerging trends in finance, life insurance, asset management, technology, and more. Now, let's talk the future of finance.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the InFi podcast. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Clifton Duncan. And when I was searching around to find a good bio for him, for you folks, I found this one that was on his own podcast, which I really like, and you'll see why. With sharp wit, striking good looks, and a voice built for listening, veteran professional actor and singer Clifton Duncan is as powerful a presence among content creators as he is on stage and on screen. He holds a Master of Fine Arts degree from New York University's Elite Graduate Acting Program, a subsidiary of the Tisch School of the Arts. In addition to multiple television guest star appearances, including on the popular NCIS New Orleans, and having starred on Broadway in The Play That Goes Wrong, co-produced by J.J. Abrams, his impressive body of work, from Shakespearean tragedy to musical comedy and beyond, has been celebrated on many of America's most prestigious stages. So I got to know Clifton through the Mises Institute. He had come down and given a talk there based on his experiences with the COVID lockdowns and vaccination requirements and how that affected his career as a Broadway and off-Broadway actor. And that's, how I got to know him. And I recently came across the fact that he has this new project he's launching involving Thomas Sowell. And so many of you may know of Sowell. He's a great free market economist that's beloved by many. So that was interesting. But in particular, how Clifton, the relevance for this podcast in terms of the future of finance, Clifton, the way he's trying to self-finance his idea and sort of go around the gatekeepers in his industry, I thought was also a very interesting story. And so that's why, for all those reasons, I thought he'd be a great guest here for the InFi podcast. You're going to really enjoy this episode. Here it is, my conversation with Clifton Duncan. Clifton, welcome to the InFi podcast.
What's going on, Bob? Thanks for having me. Good to see you again. How are you?
Yeah, nice to see you. I'm doing well, thanks.
Awesome.
So, go ahead.
I just said awesome.
Well, I'm glad you're doing well too. So, I know your background and everything, but I think we were introducing you possibly to some new listeners here. So before we get into the fun project that you're working on that we want to spend time talking about, can you just give people a bit of background that what your career was, before 2020?
Yes, was being the key word there. Yeah, so I'm a classically trained professional actor, maybe former professional actor, and I spent 20 years doing theater and TV, a little bit of film here and there as well. And long story short, after a career spent doing regional theater, off-Broadway, on-Broadway, TV.
Can you, before you explain what happened, what were some of your on-Broadway, in case some of the people maybe literally seen you or heard of the shows?
Yeah, sure. On Broadway, I did a play called The Play That Goes Wrong, which is a very popular, beloved play. I think it's still running off-Broadway, actually, and touring around the world. Off-Broadway, probably the biggest thing that I did was a show called Carmen Jones, which is a revival in New York of it's an adaptation of the opera Carmen. It was made into a movie in 1954, I want to say, starring Harry Belafonte and Dorothy Dandridge. That was off-Broadway with Anika Noni Rose, people might know best from Princess and the Frog. And then on TV, I did a couple of shows, one called Proven Innocent by, Blunt City Law, starring Jimmy Smits, another one called NCIS New Orleans with Scott Bakula. So guest starring on multiple networks. So things were going pretty awesome after 2017. I finally kind of put in the work and I was like, great, my life can finally begin. I've been, sacrificing and scraping along and doing all these things.
Can I ask you even just the backstory, because I'm just fascinated by it. So when you were a little kid, did you say, I want to be on the stage or on behind the camera, in front of the camera, I should say?
My life just makes no sense. I was a shy, introverted military brat, and I had no designs. No one in my family, is in entertainment or really in the arts at all. And I was going to be an illustrator. When I was a kid, I was dabbling in cartooning, illustration, short stories, poetry, these kinds of things. I did band as well. play the trombone. So you all can get your jokes out now. But then at a certain point, I was in probably, I think maybe my sophomore or junior year of high school. And I dropped out of my French class, much to the chagrin of my teacher who wanted to send me to the governor's school. And I followed some girl into a drama class. And that's pretty much how all straight guys wind up doing theater. Mm-hmm. And I just discovered an aptitude for acting. It came really natural to me. I never had any stage fright, like ever. I'm kind of a weirdo. I mean, I've seen people break down in tears just being in front of an audience. And it was just never a thing for me. And I took to it like a duck takes to water. And my friends couldn't even believe it when they saw me. I played Hugo in a show called Bye Bye Birdie. Mm-hmm. And I got to punch out the lead, which was a lot of fun. But, it was just really sort of a coming out moment, if you will. And that sort of set the trajectory. And I got to college. I went to Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU, out in Richmond. And got my BFA, my useless BFA in theater there. I spent
that's
a couple
what,
of
Bachelor
years.
of Fine Arts? That's
correct. Correct. Then I spent about 1.5 years in Washington, D.C., which is a great, great theater town if you're ever there. I think it's actually superior in many ways to New York City. But there I got to see professional theater for the very first time. And, just these great theaters, Arena Stage, Signature Theater, the Shakespeare Theater Company. And I said, oh my goodness, I think I'm pretty good, but I clearly need more training to do the kinds of things that I want to do. So I put all my eggs into one basket and I auditioned for New York University's graduate acting program. It's one of the top 3 conservatories in the country, the other 2 being Yale and Juilliard. They auditioned, at the time at least, they auditioned about 1,000 people from across the country, sometimes across the world. They called back 50 of those original 1,000 applicants. And then out of that 50, they chose 18 to be in the final class. So it's about a 2% chance of making it in. I got in there somehow, some way. Some of my classmates had to audition 3 or 4 times to get in. And I got to sail right through. And I got out in 2009 in the midst of the recession.
Can I just ask you, what did the audition involve? Was it like just improv or like you had a thing that you could prepare to do as reading for?
Yeah. So typically what they do is they ask you to prepare at least 2 monologues of about 1 minute to 2 minutes long, from like a contemporary play and from a classical play.
You get to choose or they tell you what to do?
Right. No, we get to choose. We choose.
Okay.
And so I did, what did I do? I forgot what the classical piece was, but the piece I think that got me in was a short monologue from a play called Before It Hits Home. And it was this jazz musician who had been infected with the HIV virus. Mm-hmm. And it was a scene where he's in complete denial about it. And there's just a lot of anger and it's actually kind of a pretty moving piece. And so that, and you can see with everybody, because like up the first day of school, basically we had this period where we got to watch everyone do their monologues and it was just a long day. But you could always see for the first year students, it was a 3-year program, but for the first year students, it was like, okay, there's the classical piece. Oh, and there's the piece that got you in. And but they, if need be, they also wanted you to have, maybe 2 other monologues memorized as backup and maybe even a song.
Can I stop you for a second? Again, sorry to keep interrupting you, but this fascinates me. So you were there during the audition, like you saw other people, most of whom did not get in with you? Is that right?
Yeah, so so what you do, so it's at the Tisch School of the Arts at 721 Broadway on their 5th floor. And so you would come up and of course they did it by times. And so you'd show up and there'd be a lobby, this lobby full of scared, anxious young people,
reciting their lines in their head or whatever. Yeah.
Just melting down. And I had a job at the time in DC, actually. I was doing a play. So I was kind of the cool guy, like, I'm going to conspicuously get out my script and show that I have value. I have a job. But then they call you in one by one and you meet the faculty. And you kind of get to know you a little bit, and you do your piece, and they give you some adjustments if they're interested, and if not, they say thank you very much, please go home. But then they call you back at the end of that hour, and to work with you a little bit more. And then after that, they do the final callbacks, like a couple of months after that. So it's kind of a nerve-wracking process.
Okay.
But
so the reason I was asking, so you didn't get to see. I was wondering, like, if you saw some people trying to get in, and you just knew, like, no, that guy's not getting in. But you didn't get to see that.
No, but I will say, like, once you're in the program, you actually get the opportunity to watch the auditions of prospective students if you want to.
Mhm.
And so that in and of itself is a fascinating process, but we don't have to go there. But you definitely saw people who were like, yeah, bro, I don't know about that. And then you saw other people who like they gave a bad audition, and then the next year you would see they wound up at Yale.
Uh-huh.
So that's why whenever someone is a graduate from the Yale School of Drama, that's why I'm like, I'm not anywhere near impressed. But that's more insider baseball.
I like the elitism among the elite. That's good.
Oh, well, and it's also among like elite actors. That's the funny thing as well. It's just, the whole sort of ego and, it is kind of playful, but still at that time, at least NYU was the best, with Juilliard being the second best, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah. What years were you there?
From 2006 to 2009.
Oh, okay. Because I was there for economics from 98 to 03. So we almost
nice.
Overlapped, but
okay. Just about.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I had interrupted you, and then another basic question, but for people, we have a general idea, but what specifically does it mean to say you're classically trained? What does that mean?
That means that your training, your foundational work is grounded in the classics, i.e. Shakespeare, Greek tragedies. I'd say probably up until maybe 19th century-ish, like Ibsen, Chekhov, these kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of Oscar Wilde, some Shaw plays. So basically you learn how to utilize heightened text is what we call it. And you're really stretching yourself to learn how to embody these giant plays, which demand a lot of the actor. And so once you can do, for instance, once you can do Shakespeare, you can work your way through To Be or Not to Be. Then when it's transferable skills, so once you're given a piece of, if you have to audition for a Law and Order or something, or you're playing a lawyer or a doctor or something, there's a lot of jargon there. You can transfer those skills of using more archaic language and activating it and making it exciting and compelling for an audience. You can then pick up a piece of, a scene which has like a lot of legal jargon or something, and you can really make it sing. And that's why for a long time, the British actors were seen as better than the Americans, just because they have, their guy is Shakespeare, but they had that grounding and expertise, and they were really able to transfer those skills over into all kinds of roles. But now there's more Americans who have those skills as well. So the playing field is much more even now.
Is this a true statement, just based on what you're saying there? Because, besides the fact that my body language wouldn't be right or whatever, I can imagine, if somebody expected me to get up and do To Be or Not to Be, like, you wouldn't even believe me. Like, I would look ridiculous saying it because I wouldn't be able, like, it would be like, oh yeah, this guy memorized the lines. This is some American, where, you wouldn't believe that I actually was Hamlet. And you're saying, there's a certain conviction, it's difficult to pull it, but if you could pull it off there and sound convincing, then to read a more colloquial script, it's a walk in the park.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty much. If To Be or Not to Be, just as an example, to me, it is a brilliant piece of rhetoric where he's having this fiercely internal debate that's externalized in the form of soliloquy. And he's talking about what it means to take action to improve your life, to meet your destiny and risk death, and what lies after death. And he comes to a conclusion about, our conscience, our ideas about our fear of what lies beyond death makes us cowards in life. You know what I mean? So, but if you can navigate that thought process in your own way, interpret it in your own way, make the language clear, find your own way into what Hamlet is, what you believe Shakespeare is saying through Hamlet in a way that's very specific and original and personal, then, that's when you hit, that's when it's really money. And then, like I said, once you're able to break down a text that's that complex, then, you get some Law and Order, whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, I can do this. I'm not a doctor, but I can play one on TV, basically.
Right. Okay, great. Okay, so you leave, you graduate from NYU, and then was it hard at first getting spots, or how'd that work?
It's terrible, because basically what they tell you, first of all, if you go to a program like that, a conservatory like that, you already have a leg up in the business. So I'd already had an agent by the time I graduated, and I'd already been taking meetings with like Warner Brothers and CBS, other casting offices. So I already sort of, was in the door. And that's why you go to one of these big schools, right? It's not because you want to end up, like, it's one thing to get your MFA, which is what I got from, some school in Wyoming because you want to teach, you know what I mean? At some university. If you're going to Yale or Juilliard or an NYU graduate acting program, you're going because you want to have a career. Some of our alumni, Mahershala Ali, Oscar winner, Sterling K. Brown, Emmy winner, Michael C. Hall from Dexter. I mean, all kinds of folks have gone to this program. And while you're there, all the top casting people are seeing your work. They're seeing you develop over that span of 3 years. But the thing is, in 2009, it was the midst of the Great Recession. And I mean, I couldn't buy a job. I mean, I got a great job right out of school in Shakespeare in the Park. And it was this brilliant production of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. And it was a star-studded thing. Anne Hathaway was one of the leads in it, and who's a sweetie pie, by the way, although she's kind of changed by now with the politics. But it was an incredible experience. But after that, I was a struggling actor. Mm-hmm. And, I was auditioning, but not getting stuff. And that's the thing. I think people don't understand that most actors, they spend most of their time looking for jobs. I try to analogize it to I hate to say this, but if you're a waiter and you have to learn a new menu, but you're interviewing at, if you're lucky, at 2, 3, 4 different restaurants per week, but you have to learn a new menu for each restaurant and present that menu. That's what auditioning is like. And so, you go into this room where, you've learned these pages and you're doing this over and over and over again. And you could be perfect for the role and still not get it. As a matter of fact, I got a story about that. For those who don't, do you know who Felicia Rashad is, right?
Yeah.
Claire Huxtable. Mm-hmm. She was directing a production of A Raisin in the Sun, a classic Lorraine Hansberry play in Connecticut. And I had just gotten back from California doing some show out there, and this audition came in for this great role that I was like, yeah, I would love to do this. I can roll out of bed and play this part. It's perfect. And I go into the audition. I'm going through the scene, and she stops me before I get to the end, and she goes, perfection. 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 Didn't get the part. Apparently somebody came in and improved upon perfection. That's how messed up the industry is. You know what I mean? Like you lose out on roles all the time for stuff that you have no control over. It might be politics in terms of like industry politics. It just might be you're too tall. You're the wrong skin tone. I mean, there's all kinds of things that it could be.
So I have to ask you on that. What do you think happened there? Is it she genuinely thought she was hiring you and then someone else came in and changed her mind? Or did she think, no, this guy's amazing. I know he's not right for the part, but let me just stop him so he's not like killing himself with the audition. I don't want him to go. And she just wanted you to know from her, like, don't take this the wrong way when I know in a little bit you're going to realize you didn't get the role.
No, I think she was really deeply appreciative of the work that I did. I was probably in the mix in the final running for being hired. But the thing about it is that, someone else could come in and just have a different sort of color. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The guy who ended up getting it is someone that I know, and his look is different. His personal kind of style is different. His delivery, his whole kind of persona is different. Mm-hmm. And so really, it's not really a matter of, oftentimes, like the best actor does not get the job. It's the one that people are most comfortable with. But in this case, it was likely just he had a quality that she felt like his audition might not have been as good as mine.
Right.
But he might have had a certain kind of internal quality or an essence that she felt, it's a subjective process, but that she felt was more right for the production that she wanted to put on. Does that make sense?
Yes. It's sort of, it's not the same thing, but I don't know if you know Clifton, the movie A Christmas Story? The dad in that, apparently Jack Nicholson read for that. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, thank God they didn't cast him. Not because Jack Nicholson's a terrible actor, but just, I view it as, no, that's the guy who is Ralphie's dad. And it couldn't be anybody else.
An even better example that people will know about is Back to the Future. There was an actor named Eric Stoltz that was cast originally as Marty McFly. And you can go back and you can watch the original footage of Eric Stoltz as Marty McFly. Mm-hmm. And that classic scene where he's in the restaurant and he discovers that, oh my God, I'm in the 1950s now. If you watch Eric Stoltz do it, he's doing a good job. It's, mm-hmm. He's committed and he's making the right choices and it's compelling but it's missing something. And the thing with Michael J. Fox is that he's a great actor, but he has a lightness about him that was really perfect for the movie.
Yeah.
And Eric Stoltz is just he was a bit too dark, a bit too heavy in terms of his sort of essence or color, you know what I mean, for the role. Mm-hmm. And so they had to make a hard decision. But I think we can all agree that, Michael J. Fox was just better for the role. Not necessarily a better actor, but a better fit for the role.
Hence, we say, no, he is Marty McFly.
Exactly. And so stuff like that happens, you know what I mean? And so so when you get out of the program, sure, you have a leg up on everyone else trying to do what you do. And even when you go to one of these elite programs, you're still, you're only one of many, many, BFAs and MFAs who've just gotten out of their own programs. So you're still kind of you're not quite at the bottom of the ladder, but you're pretty damn close to it. And what happens oftentimes in an acting career, there are some people that, I had one classmate who literally was an overnight success, but she has like 2 Tony Awards now. And so that never happens. Typically, you stick around for like a decade and people leave the industry, you build relationships over time. If you're good enough, casting people will try to find shows for you to be in. But, word gets around about your reputation and, are you great to work with? Are you good at what you do? Then one role comes along, that one job comes along, that then you become an overnight success. People's like, oh, that person. And that's what happens. But there's a British actor who said that sooner or later, all your competition just dies. And that's, most acting careers are just, they're wars of attrition. I mean, they tell you pretty much to be patient and to take a number and get in line. And then and you have to persist in the faith that your time is coming. I mean, Morgan Freeman, no one knew who he was till he was like, almost in his 50s. Dustin Hoffman had to struggle for 11 years. Meanwhile, his friends, Gene Hackman and Robert Duvall, are already on Broadway and doing films. Mm-hmm. Denzel Washington nearly gave up. His career didn't really take off till his early 30s. And, and that was when he booked a small off-Broadway play playing Malcolm X in a double bill, which Felicia Rashad actually was in as well. And then he got seen by casting people at NBC and ended up cast in St. Elsewhere. And then that sort of, he built his career over time there. So, but the industry, it's not fair. Everyone knows that. It's not really an industry where, and we all see this, right? You got people who are sort of mediocre talents, but have careers. And there could be like the best actor on the planet could be serving you your latte. So, even Stella Adler, who was Marlon Brando's teacher, she had acting students in her class who were even more talented than Marlon Brando, but they didn't get the kind of breaks that he did. So that's the kind of industry that it is. And, and it's really, really rough. And it's not for everybody. It takes a very particular kind of person to stick around and stay in it. But I was very fortunate that I worked a lot. Once things did get going for me in 2010, it was a pretty steady progression from there. So I was pretty lucky.
Okay, so that's how you were going. Things were finally clicking, and then 2020?
Yeah. 2017 was when things really began to take off. I made my Broadway debut, and then after that, I was just working with stars. Basically, I was like, wow, I can't believe this. I'm just some kid from Virginia, basically. But 2020 came along, and everything shut down. And it's funny because for the first 3 months of 2020, I was totally in the COVIDian cult. And, I was messaging my friends with statistics and like warnings and stocking up on food and supplies and everything. And then at a certain point, though, I was like, this is a little weird. I have some questions. This is not making sense. And apparently I was one of the only people in the entire theater industry or entertainment industry who was openly speaking up and saying, we can't lock down forever. We shouldn't be locking down. We shouldn't be closing schools. Mm-hmm. Then the year after that, in March 2021, that's when the vaccine mandates came down. And for me, I'd already caught the disease in December of 2020. So I was like, well, why should I have to, get inoculated against a disease that I've already gotten? And on top of that, these things were rushed out so quickly and yada, yada. There were all kinds of questions that I had. And I was just like, I'm not taking these. And I was also very, very outspoken about, we shouldn't be locking down and we shouldn't be coercing people to take these drugs. It's insane to me. As you might imagine, the consequences were quite swift and devastating. I lost my my manager, my voiceover agent ended up dropping me as well. All that momentum I built up, everything that I built up was just, that was it. It was like, it didn't really matter. And on top of all of that, there was all of the political unrest, which I was like, I have to say something about this as well. I can't keep my mouth shut about these things. It gets me into trouble. So I went from basically literally working with stars, people being like, why are you not famous? Are you an asshole or something?
Mm-hmm.
And to waiting tables with 20-year-olds in Atlanta, Georgia. I joke about it that typically what you do is that you wait tables until you make it, but I made it and then went to waiting tables. My life makes no sense. So that was pretty depressing and devastating. And I was just like, I'm 40 years old now. I spent half my life doing this one thing. And now what am I going to do now? I have no idea what I was going to do.
Were people like, was anybody privately kind of saying to you, yeah, I had some concerns. Dude, why don't you just take the shot, man? Just, was anyone talking like that, or were they all looking at you like you are a monster?
There were a couple of people who privately were like, man, I agree with you. They didn't, encourage me to take it, but they were like, I agree with you. I totally get it. There's one guy who's actually in the Harry Potter show on Broadway right now. And, he had just had a daughter and, he was like, I'm with you, man. But, this is a great paycheck and a great gig. And I got to take care of my family and everything. And, but then publicly, like there was one actor named Chad Kimball who was a Tony nominee for a play called Memphis a while ago. And he got a lot of heat when I think he was in Washington at the time. And Governor Inslee had these ridiculous restrictions about like, you can't sing in church. And so Chad tweeted about, I will not let, some governor keep me from tweeting and worshiping my Lord or whatever. And theater Twitter just tore him to shreds. And people were just saying stuff like, I hope to never be in a rehearsal room with you. You're awful. You're a killer, yada, yada, yada. And I jumped in and I was like, well, Chad's right. You know what I mean? He's talking about government overreach. Like, that's what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. And, then I got dragged into it, and then, of course, if you take any sort of stance on the vaccine, that's just, you're a monster. And for me, I was never any sort of advocate against vaccines or against the concept of vaccination. I just had an ethical problem with the mandates. But, that level of nuance was not allowed. And that was the end of it all.
Huh. Okay. And was it the specific, was it just literally the law, or was it like the specific venues were saying on their own authority, no, like any show that's going to take place in this theater, everyone's got to be vaccinated?
Yeah, well, it was really bizarre. The theater industry in particular, but the entertainment industry in general, really, I'd say was sort of an outlier. I mean, we all know it's a very far left industry, and they reacted in such an extreme fashion. I mean, to the extent where when we were coming back to work, when we were trying to negotiate, the union was trying to talk about, how to get back to work. I mean, it was stuff like, we're going to cancel backstage visits. We're going to cancel stage dooring after the shows. We're going to cancel, if we have silverware, we have to have it individually wrapped and, all kinds of just, minutia and just micromanaged, like just crazy stuff. So it was just a huge extreme reaction to it. But the thing is that the unions, both Actors Equity, which is the Stage Actors Union, and SAG-AFTRA, the Film Actors Union, were just all in on this stuff. And they were saying from the perspective of protecting their members. Right. They're talking about, and Equity was very strange because they said they pretty much presumed from the jump that all companies were going to be fully vaccinated. There was never, ever they never made any sort of leeway for people to say no. It was very, very strange to the point where I think, I wonder if there's some kind of corruption going on. I have no evidence of that, but I just wonder about that. But basically what happened is that every single theater company or production company imposed these mandates. And Hamilton was the first show to come out and say forcefully, if you want to work on this show, every single person backstage, in the house, on stage will have to be vaccinated. And after that, Hamilton is the big show on Broadway, and everyone else followed suit right after that. So you couldn't go anywhere, even in small, like random community theaters or dinner theaters in the smallest town ever were using these mandates. So there was nowhere you could work if you didn't get the shot or you didn't fake it, which I refused to do anyway. So it was an industry-wide thing. And people said, oh, you can get exemptions, yada, 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 but that's nonsense. No one I know got any exemption. Like there was a friend of mine who, her daughter was blinded in one eye by a childhood vaccine. She could not get an exemption. Her son died 12 hours after taking the J&J, and it's just, there's all kinds of things that were just really weird about it. And you couldn't get a job. You couldn't get a job.
Mhm.
And, and even to this day, there are still people there are still productions demanding that you be updated, in your vaccinations. It's just, that's a whole other tangent. I don't know if they'll really ever let it go or ever be right again.
Mhm.
But yeah, long story short, man, there was nowhere you could work.
Okay, well, I guess the bright side of all that is that you now thought of a way that you can still do what you love and sort of bring in some of these other ideas about, standing up against government overreach. So can you explain what your project is?
Well, I'll start a little bit before that, because
Sure.
It's been a very strange few years. Before I had a public sort of online presence where it was just a Twitter account where I was like, hey guys, I'm in this show, come and see me, and yada, yada, yada. And of course, no one cared about that. But I also had this anonymous Twitter account where I shared my true opinions. But in 2020, things were just so uproarious. And I said, you know what, forget it, man. I have to speak out and say something. And so it was really interesting because I noticed that between me genuinely saying what I think and, and meeting the right people, being on the right shows, somehow, some way over the past few years, I've been able to build this pretty sizable following. I call myself an accidental influencer. I mean, I never asked for any of this. And so I think that kind of laid the foundation in terms of getting me more known, getting my face out there.
Mhm.
And so then on top of all of that, I said, I had this idea that I've nestled for a few years now. And whenever I spoke to anybody about it, they would say, oh my God, Clifton, you have to do it. That's an amazing idea. I have a friend who said that's $1 million idea. You have to go for it. It was inspired in part by seeing shows like, there's a show called Thurgood, which Lawrence Fishburne did a few years ago, about 10 years ago, actually, about Thurgood Marshall. It's a one-man show. There's another show called, I saw a show in New York called Satchmo at the Waldorf, which is a one-man play about Louis Armstrong.
Mhm.
And way back in 1977, the great James Earl Jones did a play called Robeson about the actor and athlete and activist Paul Robeson, another one-man play. And so I was just like, who would make a great subject for a one-person show that I could create myself? And naturally, I just like, well, Thomas Sowell.
Mhm.
It seems like Thomas Sowell is like, he's criminally unknown. He's not, you'd never see him in, or a show about him in our traditional theater institutions and industries. And he's become a very monumental figure. And it just seems like it was a no-brainer to me. You know what I mean? So my good colleague, Tom Woods, just, pushed me and said, let's do this thing, man. Like, get it off the ground. He was so excited about it. And he pushed me, and I created this crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo.
Well, Clifton, let me just stop your second.
Yeah.
I think probably most of our audience knows who he is, but can you just speak a little bit, like, who is Thomas Sowell, in case somebody's like, I don't know who that is?
Yeah, so Tom Sowell is, an economist, a philosopher, in some cases a historian, but he's a Black man who was born in Jim Crow South. And he spent the first part of his life as a diehard Marxist. And then even after studying with the great economist Milton Friedman, he was still a diehard Marxist. But then it was working for the government that ended up changing his mind. And so now, 45 books, thousands of articles later, he is one of America's best kept secrets in terms of thinkers and philosophers and economists. His work certainly changed my life when I encountered it. And, I'm reading his story now, his memoirs, and there are interesting parallels between his life and mine in terms of our sort of ideological journey. So for those who don't know who he is, that is Thomas Sowell in a nutshell.
Yeah, just to give a little more so like he came on my radar. I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh when I was like, that's kind of what got me politically active when I was in high school. My dad listened to him in the car. And then when Rush would sometimes let Walter Williams host the show when Rush was on vacation, and Walter Williams would then, when he was the host of, Rush Limbaugh's show for that day, would often bring on Thomas Sowell as a special guest for, 20 minutes, and they talk about stuff. And so over the years, Sowell has kind of just blossomed until now. He's like this cult figure almost within certain circles of like libertarian conservative types, like, there's I think I follow on Twitter, like a Thomas Sowell account that's not him. It just, somebody that it just generates Thomas Sowell memes all day. And it's a, fun little thing. And yeah, he's just written, as you say, Clifton, a ton on, basic primers on free market economics, but also a lot of like anthropological, cultural studies and things like that. So very well-rounded, interesting guy.
No, I would agree with that. But you would also have to agree that generally speaking, women are paid less, for example, for the same jobs as men.
No, I would not. I would not agree with that. If you're talking about women with the same number of years of experience, with the same continuous service, et cetera, then when I look at that, I don't find that disparity. I find, for example, in many cases, the women are making more, depending on how you break the data down. The difference with women is between married women and everybody else. That's the real difference.
Well, even as to single women, the Census Bureau statistics, the most recent ones I could find, 1978, say that single men are earning $11,100 and single women are earning $9,300.
Yes, I love the word single that is used. When I did my study, I didn't use single, I used never married. You see, a woman who is single at age 40, having spent 10 or 20 years raising children, is really not quite the same as a man at age 40 who's been working continuously for 20 years.
And the differential she cited is not that great, so it could easily be accounted for by the...
Yes, because when I break them down the other way, I did this for the academic world, and there I found the women who were never married, which is the term the way I take it. There they were earning more than the men. And similarly, when the government did data some years ago on women who had been working continuously since high school into their 30s, there you found that they were making slightly more than men of the same description.
Well, he a lot of his work, the scope of his work, it really covers like just the human condition in a really interesting way. And but it's funny because he's enjoying a bit of a renaissance right now in terms of popularity. You can go to YouTube right now and you can find videos of like young people watching his videos and reacting to them and saying, "Oh my God, like this guy makes sense. How come I've never heard of him before?" So it's really interesting now that as he's 90, almost 94 years old, and sort of looking at the last phase of his life, but he's enjoying this sort of blossoming interest, which I think is just, kind of poetic in a way.
Yeah, maybe around here we will have inserted a clip or something just in case the people watching the video, just to get a sense of, he's a very compelling guy. Okay, so now what's your project idea, since I interrupted you?
Yeah, so it's just a one-man show about the man, the myth, and the legend. In the process of developing it right now and creating the script, and what I don't want for it to be is a straight bio play where it's like, like an x-axis, kind of like this happened, and then this happened, and this happened, and this happened, because you can just go to a documentary or to Wikipedia for that. Mm-hmm. The main goal is to create a compelling, exciting piece of theater about a compelling, exciting person. Part of it is about who is he, where did he come from, and what's his trajectory and his story, but it's also about getting underneath the skin of who this person is. It's about exploring the emotional life of this great thinker, which I think is pretty interesting in terms of, the mind and the heart and the soul, if you will. And I mentioned the Satchmo at the Waldorf, the Louis Armstrong show. One of the really interesting things about that show was that at certain points, this actor, black actor, obviously, playing Louis Armstrong, he would transform, so to speak, into other characters. Namely, one was Miles Davis, which is pretty awesome. But the other was Armstrong's white manager. And it's always fun to be able to suspend your disbelief as an audience member to see this person transform their essence into a different character. And so with the soul play, you have all kinds of possibilities. I mean, I'm a 6'3", broad-shouldered guy, but can I transform myself into a Walter E. Williams or into a Friedrich Hayek or into a Milton Friedman? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's these kinds of things that allow for a lot of potential, you know what I mean? And on top of that, there's contrasting Sowell's views with other prominent Black voices from, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X to Barack Obama. So, they might show up in the play at a certain point. And, through how I alter my voice and my body and my cadence and all these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So, it's an exploration of his ideas and of his story, but also it's a deep dive into who the person is. And that's where my training as an actor comes in. It's investigating and exploring, who is this person? Where did he come from? What makes him tick? What makes him angry? What makes him sad? What is he afraid of? These kinds of sides you don't really get to see. And in a way, I'm interpreting the character of Thomas Sowell as Clifton Duncan. And that's an exciting aspect as well.
Yeah, so I liked, I think I heard you on Tom Woods' show talking about that, and you don't have to do it here if you don't want to, but I think you even did your Malcolm X on that.
Oh, did I? I don't remember that. But yeah, no, I won't do it here.
But
it's
that's when you did it. I realized oh yeah, so this isn't just Clifton. Like, it's not just Thomas Sowell talking to the audience. Like, and then when I was 15, I got this for my birthday, and then I did this, and then I read this book.
Right.
It's
because that's just the most boring thing you could ever think of. So you want to reach for what are the most exciting dynamic parts that you can pull out. And I mean, I already know that I don't want the show to be like in a flat proscenium. I'd rather do it in what's called a thrust stage, which is you have an audience in front of you and on the sides. And it's way more immersive. And, there's all kinds of things you can do. It's a really, really exciting prospect. But part of that, again, is putting in the work to what I want to do, ideally, is to become so familiar with the character of Thomas Sowell that I can be able to improvise, in character and play in character. That's when you know that you really nailed it. That's the big journey that we're on right now.
Have you ever, in your career thus far, played a historical person before?
I actually played Malcolm X.
Okay. So maybe that's why, that.
Well, there was it was like a one day, it was like a quick guest star on a CBS show. But have I played anyone? It's been so long, I can't remember. I don't think so. But it's interesting because it's a challenge because you don't want to. The trap is falling into mere impressionism,
right,
and mere imitation. Because then you become basically like an SNL sketch. And there's no depth underneath the surface. It's just very superficial. Oh, okay, he sounds like that person, but it's like it becomes parody basically.
Right.
What you want to do, I mean, an example I can think of is is Will Smith in Ali.
Yeah.
It's Will Smith is capable, when he applies himself, but it came off as more of someone trying to play Muhammad Ali versus Denzel Washington playing Malcolm X, and you're like to the point where he was so good in that movie that when I see a picture of Malcolm X today, I see both men. You know what I mean? Like, Denzel looks nothing like Malcolm, but he found something inside of himself. You know what I mean? He was able to channel the essence of Malcolm X. That's what you want to do as an actor. You want to find your way into, what are the parts of you that are analogous to the character you're playing? How are they different? How can you make these different aspects, real to you? How can you use yourself, right, to become use the aspects of yourself in service of becoming this other person? And that's where the fun and the challenge is, and that from that aspect, from that point of view.
Okay, great. So at this point, and you have an Indiegogo campaign? Is that the right term?
Yes, it's an Indiegogo campaign. The website is it's sowellplay.com, SOWELL play.com. Thank you, Tom Woods, for setting that up for me. I originally just asked for, like $10,000 just so I can, just take some time off from life and immerse myself, into Sowell's work and write a draft, you know what I mean? Write a script. But when I announced it, it went insane. And so now I believe last time I checked, the campaign is sitting at 94,500, something insane. It's like 924% of our original goal, and with over 700 backers. And it almost doesn't feel real, just how successful the campaign has been. But it's just very exciting and gratifying to see people be so excited, not only about Thomas Sowell, not only about me, but just about the fact that people are supporting. And this is at a time, by the way, where the theater industry is not doing well. Broadway has not returned to its pre-pandemic box office levels. There are theaters across the country that are closing or truncating their seasons. They're sitting there talking about, there's a donor shortage and people aren't spending money and da-da-da-da-da. And meanwhile, I'm one guy who raised almost $100,000 to do a play. You know what I mean? So it's gratifying in that sense as well to say, you all decided that someone like me should not be allowed to work. And yet here I am, not only creating work for myself, creating opportunities for myself, but also energizing, I think, an aspect of, I guess I'll say like more sort of right-wing spaces of, who have probably felt pushed out or pushed away by our cultural institutions and all the politics and everything. So it's really gratifying to see there's a huge, huge audience out there that wants to see great art. They want to be entertained. They want to, to go to the theater. They want to be transported by artists who don't hate them. Right. So that's also just really, really gratifying. And people have come to me and said, it looks like you might be sort of forging a new path forward in terms of how independent artists can break out of the system as it is, which I think is failing and going to collapse inevitably, or at least get way, way worse before it gets better. But they're like, yeah, you're sort of leading the charge on a new way to do things. And, I never set out to do any of that. I just had an idea I was excited about. And it's blossomed into this big thing.
Well, that's a thin reed by which I'm justifying, how can I get Clifton on this show? It's because it's the future of finance. I love your story, obviously. And, Thomas Sowell, free market economist, he fits in with the culture here. But that specifically is the hook for us here is that, yeah, you're coming up with a new way to finance your production. This is sort of breaking the monopoly or the cartel, whatever term you want to use in terms of the existing structure. And right, because I know there's hundreds of thousands of people that want to see this show, and I'm one of them. By the way, Clifton, I am going to contribute. I just realized I didn't actually contribute yet, so I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I'll do it. Encourage others to do it.
Thank you.
So thank you. We're up against the clock here. So my guest has been Clifton Duncan. Clifton, thanks for what you're doing, and best of success. I can't wait to see the show.
Well, Robert, thanks a lot. Again, you can still give at www.soulplay.com, and I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Sure thing. And thank you, everyone. And if you feel so moved, please help Clifton get this show on the road, as they say. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
This concludes another episode of InFi, The Future of Finance, with Dr. Robert Murphy. The information provided is for educational purposes and does not constitute financial advice. Consult with qualified professionals before making any financial or investment decisions. For more information on the host and for previous episodes, visit InFi, thefutureoffinance.io. Thanks for listening.